It's a very human experience to be attached to a certain person, to fall in love, and to be committed to someone.
You feel that everything around you is going well, everything around you is a bliss. And then from there, you have now a development of inspiration, meaning that the person that you're with allows you to become a better person yourself.
There are some telltale signs that someone is in love. You start to feel butterflies in your stomach. You can't get that special someone out of your mind. And eventually, you're even planning your future together. Many of us think these warm, fuzzy feelings are matters of the heart, but they're actually due to chemicals in our brain. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez. Join us as we learn the science behind falling in love. Welcome to MedTalk Health Talk. February is Love Month, but what exactly does it mean to fall in love? To tell us more about the science behind it, let's welcome to the show Richtofen de Jesus, who's a psychologist from St. Luke's Medical Center at the Global City. We're also joined by Dr. Jacqueline Dedis Palines, who is a neurologist from the Batangas Medical Center. Now, before we talk about the science behind love, for that matter, let's talk about first what it means to actually fall in love. I'll start the discussion with Tofi.
It means that you're finding a significant other that has a good level of similarity, someone who is proximate to you, and more importantly, someone that you would like to frequently be with. So being in love is a very strong emotion in which you like to choose this person above anything else. And he or she is the kind of person who gives you the best out of who you are.
Now, I'll ask Dr. Den, if love is a choice, many also say that when someone falls in love, they can't help it. It's something that's uncontrollable. But what actually happens is there are certain chemicals in our brain that are released. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Love is quite literally a matter of the brain, not really so much of the heart, although it is affected, okay? So the chemicals involved, the most important one that is frequently talked about is something called dopamine. So dopamine is this little friend that is produced at the deepest parts of our brain in the hypothalamus, and it affects certain parts of the brain, both in the cortex and the subcortex, so that's just fancy jargon, that tells us that it's involved in the reward systems. So the feeling of falling in love is translated in our brain as something that makes us feel rewarded. And there are also other hormones like oxytocin and vasopressin that makes us feel attached to someone. It's a very human experience to be attached to a certain person, to fall in love, and to be committed to someone. So these are the chemicals involved in those.
Tofi, how can you explain that notion where someone is just drawn to someone, attracted to someone uncontrollably kung hindi pheromones?
Actually, Doc Freddy, it's a very important factor that we try to look back on the person's past relationship, beginning with the first relationship, which is with the parents. Most often than not, we then become attracted to somebody like our parent. Okay? So that's why if you're now looking at your partners, it might be a reminder of who your dad is or who your mom is, because that's the first relationship that you have. And then up comes to the point that when you go to school, you then try to become more attracted with the people that you have similar interests with, someone who's always to be with you, someone who's always there for you. So those are the things that build up to the pleasure of being in love.
Let's delve into that notion a little bit more, Tofi. So we are attracted to people that remind us of our past relationships, primarily from that our parents. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about physical attraction, because that's what people see first and foremost when they see someone for the first time. And these physical traits are what triggers these chemicals. Let's talk about that. So what are people drawn in? Is it purely their past?
Actually, as you go through your past, you then develop your ideals. So if somebody fits that ideal schema or image for you, then it becomes a start of your attraction process. So in that situation, let's say you're in a bar, and then you have to yourself, okay, I want to see a girl who's 5'6", or maybe let's say you're looking for a guy, I want him to be tall, I want him to have abs, things like that. So if these people start to fit your schema, then you become started to get attracted to them. But that's still on a very superficial level.
That's a very good point, superficial level. Dr. Den, let's talk about that. So this notion of love at first sight, does that hold any true? Because it releases Are the chemicals released in our brain for pleasure from that reward system? Is it the same chemicals when someone says they fell in love with someone at first sight?
So when we see someone attractive to us, it makes us happy, and it, in an evolutionary sense, it tells us that, hey, this is a potential mate. Maybe I can propagate my species with this person. So in an evolutionary standpoint, it's going to be beneficial for you to seek someone whom you think will take good care of you and whom you can care for in return.
Are there signs physically, physiologically in a person that may signify that this person is attracted to someone? Some signs that are beyond their control.
So it's interesting. So beyond our control, that tells us that our sympathetic systems might be activated. So the signs of that, when we look at another person, maybe their pupils are a little bigger than usual, their cheeks are flushed, and then they're smiling a little more. So these might be subtle cues that you might not even know that you're looking for, but when you see that in a person, you might think, oh, this is interesting, this person interests me. So you might be more likely to be attracted to that person.
What are some of the psychological effects of people who fall in love?
The first thing that happens now is that you become optimistic about what you're going through. You feel that everything around you is going well, everything around you is a bliss. And then from there, you have now a development of inspiration, meaning that the person that you're with allows you to become a better person yourself. That's why I usually tell patients, you're really in love if you're really developing yourself also in the process. And then from there, you then seek the commitment. You want to stay with this person for a longer time. You want to see this person on a deeper level. You want to have a better emotional connection with this person. So you now develop into a more committed relationship in which you want to say, you know what, this is the only person for me.
So there are steps. There are certain steps. It's like, okay, I meet this person for the first time. Now, if I want to see this person further and do more things with this person, I see myself with this person. You could call that as falling in love with a person. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's actually the more technical term is you're now becoming more emotionally connected.
But not yet in love.
Not yet in love, emotionally connected.
Okay, how do we know that we are actually in love with someone?
So primarily, after you get emotionally connected with someone, you now start seeing their faults. And the acceptance of those faults can then say that this is now something even just more than attraction. So that's now the time that you can become more committed and more loving towards that person. You then start to develop the care for that person, the attention for that person's welfare, understanding what you can still do to help that person.
So we're looking at more commitment now as we move further into this relationship. And while you're usually happy when in love, sometimes we end up with a broken heart. When we return, we'll discuss what happens to our brain when we go through heartache. So stay with us here on MedTalk Health Talk. When we fall in love, chemicals in our brain produce physical as well as emotional responses, but can also happen when we get our hearts broken. So let's welcome back Rick De Jesus, psychologist from St. Luke's Medical Center, Global City, and also Dr. Jacqueline Denise Palines, who is a neurologist from the Batangas Medical Center. So continuing with the discussion, as anyone knows, someone who is going through a heartbreak or the loss of a loved one, this can be a very challenging experience to say the least. Let's talk about that a little bit. Tofi, is heartbreak part and parcel with life? Is it the amount of love that you give someone? Is that the amount of heartbreak that you will get if that person is lost? Yes.
Actually, it is, okay? Especially if there has been a lot of emotion that has been invested in the relationship, all the more that you will feel the heartbreak after that. So actually, it's still a positive way because you're grieving towards it. You're trying to really go through the loss. So sometimes there's also some part of denial or some part of self-blame, pining, depression, and then lastly would be acceptance. So it does have a similarity on how we grieve towards death because technically we lost something, we lost the relationship. So usually when we incur heartbreak, we then first deny the fact that the relationship is really over. We try to do our best to win it back, sometimes even to the point of desperation.
Then I'd like to ask, a lot of people say, it's more of an emotional thing, going through heartbreak, but there's actual physical hurt. People really have physical pain. Why does this happen? What is going on in a person's body who is undergoing heartbreak?
Okay, so heartbreak, well, it is a form of stress for all of us, okay? And I'm sure it's not foreign to many of us. And I'm not sure if you've felt this before, but when we are going through heartbreak, apart from the sense of despair, sometimes we feel things like shaking of our hands, sometimes we feel cold of all of a reason, we sweat, our heart beats right out of our chest. So these are all effects of a hormone called cortisol, okay? Cortisol, when it's really high in our body, really translate it as a form of stress, like we are in danger or we are in a bad situation. And when we are in danger, our body really wants to preserve itself. So physically, yes, we can feel that we are in overdrive. This can have physical effects like problems with sleep, problems with eating, and on the bad side, sometimes it's also associated with actual physical diseases like hypertension, diabetes. There's also this famous syndrome called the broken heart syndrome, where our heart really reels from the sudden cortisol rush and suddenly we have cardiomyopathy.
So there's actual physical negatives that can happen through a heartbreak. When should someone consult a doctor already? When should they say that these symptoms are no longer normal and they're afraid?
The broken heart syndrome that I mentioned before, it's a form of cardiomyopathy. It can feel like a heart attack, so if you feel like there's chest heaviness or having a hard time breathing, it's time to go to the emergency room. But in the long term, if you or someone close to you is starting to raise concerns that you're not functioning properly, you're not eating properly, you haven't had a good night's sleep for like a week or so, you don't feel comfortable anymore, it's always good to seek professional help. We can't go through this alone.
Now, Tofi, is there anything positive that can be gained from a bad heartbreak?
Definitely, it starts with you valuing yourself. You now understand that you don't let people treat you that way. You need to let yourself understand that there are strengths that you can get from yourself and strengths that this can be developed as time would go by. So you now become a better person. And that's why Doc Freddy, if I may say so, I don't let patients say they want to go back to what was their life before the relationship, because that's regressing. I tell them, don't forget of your relationship. That enabled you to become who you are now.
Tofi, is the environment important in having a meaningful relationship where love is nurtured? What I'm talking about is it possible to find meaningful relationships with those who are in bars where alcohol is free-flowing, dating apps, technology? Are these avenues where we can find real relationships?
Definitely. For example, let's say you met somebody on a wedding. It's a very emotional event. So one way or another, there's an additional positive energy that comes with it. For example, you met somebody in a bar. There's less inhibition that you have. So there's less hesitation from you when you're trying to contact somebody. The internet is a very good tool because what happens there is that you have some sort of shield that your insecurities, your vulnerabilities are not easily seen. So therefore, you are more confident of doing that. So I think it's a good startup. It's a good springboard. But more importantly, remembering to really know the person deeply is the one that will be determinant of the kind of relationship that you will have.
Okay, speaking of those types of relationships or relationships in general, I have to touch on relationships that are not ideal, because sometimes the last person to know that they are in a not so ideal relationship is that person involved. So let's talk about toxic relationships a little bit. What are some of the red flags that someone is in a toxic relationship?
The first one is that you're now letting yourself go of certain things. As I was saying a while ago, being in love means that you're developing yourself in the process. But in the process of you are detrimental to yourself, that's a start. You then let go of your responsibilities. You withdraw from your friends. You try to go into substances that can be harmful for you. So when you then have those kind of behaviors already, it's a sign that this relationship may not be worth it.
Okay. Now then, are there any other side effects of an abusive relationship, other pathologies, other diseases that might come out from an abusive relationship?
Trauma responses can have a long-term impact from us. A lot of people who came from bad relationships may have a different way of going about their next relationship. So it could be from a trauma response. And people who really suffer from things like PTSD from more violent abuses.
It's important, if you or someone you know is an abusive or toxic relationship, please seek professional help right away. Now up next, how can you tell the difference between love and lust? More on this when we return, so keep it here on Med Talk Health Talk. Many theories indicate that love changes over time, and passionate love can lead to compassionate love in years' time. But how can you tell the difference? Let's welcome back to the show Rick De Jesus, psychologist from St. Luke's Medical Center at the Global City, and Dr. Jacqueline Denise Palines, who is an adult neurologist from the Batangas Medical Center. Love, lust, Dr. Den talked about different chemicals are involved in both, but how can both parties know what is in their relationship? Is it part and parcel of falling in love, falling in lust first?
Actually, it all starts with how the progression is. Lust is usually a very quick start and a very quick finish. Okay? As long as you've done the deed, that's it. On the other hand, passion or physical love is a little bit more long-term. It then allows you to really enjoy the person, not only on a sexual level, but on the entire physicality of the person. Kissing, hugging, petting, embracing the person, having sex with the person, all of those things are within the passion, and it's not something within just lust. So when you love a person, you just don't look at the person on a sexual level, but you look at them on an entire physicality. And then from there, you then develop intimacy. People always say that intimacy and passion are the same. It's not. Actually, intimacy is getting to know that person on a deeper level. It's more of like just raising an eyebrow already knows a good communication between the two of you. Okay? And then from there, commitment will then come in. So if it's really love, you start with passion because it's more physical, then you go with intimacy, getting to know the person better, and having the promise of commitment.
Then is it possible to trust, is it good for that matter, to trust your instincts, trust what you feel, trust what the chemicals in your body are signaling you when it comes to relationships?
When we are in the phase of infatuation or falling in love, some parts of our brain involved with reasoning and involved with fear are actually less active. So we're less afraid. We're not thinking very straight when we are in a rush. And sometimes they say that even at the earliest phase of love, our brain is similar to that of someone with obsessive compulsive disorder. So we tend to think repeatedly about the person that we like, and sometimes we lose reason. So it's very important to approach love in a learned way, maybe in a very careful manner, so that we can't be separated from our reason, is what I'm saying.
Now, Tofi, what should be the proper mindset for someone who is either going into a relationship, who is either falling in love, or even those who are falling out of love?
For those falling in love, I usually say, be careful. You don't have to rush things. It's good to enjoy while it lasts. Because primarily, the height of the kilig moments, if I may call it, is just usually at the start because it's still something new. As you go and settle in, the commitment will be a better factor for your relationship. So just slow down. Try to get the person better for what it is. Try to get all of the aspects of the person, and always ask yourself, are you willing to accept what the person is not good at? Because it's easy to accept the person's capabilities, but what's more difficult is to accept the person's weaknesses. And for those falling out of love, it's okay. There's still always hope. You don't have to be a PhD. You know what a PhD is, Doc Freddy? Panghabang buhay dalaga. Okay? So you don't have to be something like that. There is always hope. As long as you keep yourself available and open to meeting new people, having new experiences, love can find you.
Okay, very good advice there. And then, do you have any advice for our viewers, especially those who are thinking of Is it possible to shorten this heartbreak that I'm feeling through medication? Can I take things, because they probably use other substances to cope with what they're feeling? What's your advice for them?
All right, so yeah, heartbreak is really difficult because of both the physical and emotional burdens that we're gonna feel. My advice is try not to drown yourself in substances that can artificially bring that happiness to you. We all know that long-term alcohol use is gonna be bad for you. So if you try to drown your sorrows in alcohol, trying to numb the bad feelings that you are feeling, it's gonna do you harm in the long term. So other advice that I can give to someone with a broken heart, you really have to take care of yourself. So they say that sometimes you can neglect your nutrition when you are broken-hearted, but that's gonna make your body feel so bad. And sometimes you're not gonna be able to sleep, but sleep is really important for us to process our feelings so that when we sleep at the right time, our memories won't seem so negative anymore. So we can't neglect good food, good sleep, and also good exercise. Okay? We have to keep ourselves busy.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dan, and thank you so much, Tofi, once again for being with us, and both of you for sharing your expertise and your time with our viewers. Because love is definitely a complex thing, but ultimately it boils down to our evolutionary need to fall in love and find someone to share our lives with. Always remember, passion, intimacy, commitment. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for joining us here on MedTalk Health Talk.